Togo, Wikipedia audio. Togo, officially the Togolese Republic, is a sovereign state in West Africa bordered by Ghana to the west, Benin to the east and Burkina Faso to the north. It extends south to the Gulf of Guinea, where its capital Lomé is located. Togo covers 57,000 square kilometers, making it one of the smallest countries in Africa, with a population of approximately 7.6 million. From the 11th to the 16th century, various tribes entered the region from all directions. From the 16th century to the 18th century, the coastal region was a major trading center for Europeans to search for slaves, earning Togo and the surrounding region the name the Slave Coast. In 1884, Germany declared a region including present-day Togo as a protectorate called Togoland. After World War I, rule over Togo was transferred to France. Togo gained its independence from France in 1960. In 1967, Gnassingbé Eyadéma led a successful military coup d'état after which he became president of an anti-communist, single-party state. Eventually in 1993, Eyadéma faced multi-party elections, which were marred by irregularities, and won the presidency 3 times. At the time of his death, Eyadéma was the longest-serving leader in modern African history, having been president for 38 years. In 2005, his son Faure Gnassingbé was elected president. Togo is a tropical, sub-Saharan nation, whose economy depends highly on agriculture, with a climate that provides good growing seasons. While the official language is French, many other languages are spoken in Togo, particularly those of the Gbe family. The largest religious group in Togo consists of those with indigenous beliefs, and there are significant Christian and Muslim minorities. Togo is a member of the United Nations, African Union, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, South Atlantic Peace and Cooperation Zone, Francophonie and Economic Community of West African States. History. Archaeological finds indicate that ancient tribes were able to produce pottery and process iron. The name Togo is translated from the Yu language as land where lagoons lie. Not much is known of the period before arrival of the Portuguese in 1490. During the period from the 11th century to the 16th century, various tribes entered the region from all directions, the Yu from the east, and the Mina and Gun from the west. Most of them settled in coastal areas. The slave trade began in the 16th century, and for the next 200 years the coastal region was a major trading center for Europeans in search of slaves, earning Togo and the surrounding region the name the Slave Coast. In 1884, a treaty was signed at Togoville with the King Mlapa III, whereby Germany claimed a protectorate over a stretch of territory along the coast and gradually extended its control inland. Its borders were defined after the capture of hinterland by German forces and signing agreements with France and Britain. In 1905, this became the German colony of Togoland. The local population was forced to work, cultivate cotton, coffee and cocoa and pay high taxes. A railway and the port of Lomé were built for export of agricultural products. The Germans introduced modern techniques of cultivation of cocoa, coffee, and cotton and developed the infrastructure. During the First World War, Togoland was invaded by Britain and France, proclaiming the Anglo-French condominium. On December 7, 1916, the condominium collapsed and Togo was divided into British and French zones. July 20, 1922, Great Britain received the League of Nations mandate to govern the western part of Togo and France to govern the eastern part. In 1945, the country received the right to send 3 representatives to the French Parliament. After World War II, these mandates became UN Trust territories. The residents of British Togoland voted to join the Gold Coast as part of the new independent nation of Ghana in 1957. French Togoland became an autonomous republic within the French Union in 1959, while France retained the right to control the defense, foreign relations, and finances. The Togolese Republic was proclaimed on April 27, 1960. In the first presidential elections in 1961, Sylvanus Olympio became the first president, gaining 100% of the vote in elections boycotted by the opposition. On April 9, 1961, the Constitution of the Togolese Republic was adopted, according to which the supreme legislative body was the National Assembly of Togo. In December 1961, leaders of opposition parties were arrested because they were accused of the preparation of an anti-government conspiracy. A decree was issued on the dissolution of the opposition parties. Olympio tried to reduce dependence on France by establishing cooperation with the United States, Great Britain, and Germany. He also rejected efforts of French soldiers who were demobilized after the Algerian War and tried to get a position in the Togolese army. These factors eventually led to a military coup on January 13, 1963, during which he was assassinated by a group of soldiers under the direction of Sergeant Nassing B. Iadima. A state of emergency was declared in Togo. The military handed over power to an interim government led by Nicolas Grunitzky. In May 1963, Grunitzky was elected President of the Republic. The new leadership pursued a policy of developing relations with France. His main aim was to dampen the divisions between North and South, promulgate a new constitution, and introduce a multi-party system. Exactly 4 years later, on January 13, 1967, Iadima Nassing B overthrew Grunitzky in a bloodless coup and assumed the presidency. He created the Rally of the Togolese People Party, banned activities of other political parties and introduced a one-party system in November 1969. He was re-elected in 1979 and 1986. In 1983, the privatization program launched and in 1991 other political parties were allowed. In 1993, the EU froze the partnership, describing Iadima's re-election in 1993, 1998, and 2003, as a seizure of power. In April 2004, in Brussels, talks were held between the European Union and Togo on the resumption of cooperation. Before colonization, Iadima Nassing B suddenly died on February 5, 2005 after 38 years in power, the longest occupation of any dictator in Africa. The military's immediate installation of his son, Nassing B, as president provoked widespread international condemnation, except from France. Some democratically elected African leaders such as Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal and Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria supported the move, thereby creating a rift within the African Union. Nassing B left the power and held elections, which he won 2 months later. The opposition declared that the election results were fraudulent. The events in 2005 led to re-question the commitment to democracy that Togo had contracted in an attempt to normalize relations with the EU, which cut off aid in 1993 to the uncertainty of the human rights situation. In addition, up to 400 people were killed for political violence surrounding the presidential elections, according to the UN. Around 40,000 Togolese fled to neighboring countries. Nasingbe was re-elected in 2010 and 2015. In late 2017, anti-government protests erupted in Togo, the biggest since ones after the 2005 election. They demand the resignation of Nasingbe, who is part of a family they say has been in power too long. The UN has condemned the resulting crackdown by Togolese security forces, and Gambia's foreign minister, Hussein Darboe, had to issue a correction after saying that Nasingbe should resign. Togo has an area equal to 56,785 km² and is one of the smallest countries in Africa. It borders the Bight of Benin in the south, Ghana to the west, Benin to the east, and to the north, Togo is bound by Burkina Faso. Togo lies mostly between latitudes 6 degrees and 11 degrees north, and longitudes 0 degrees and 2 degrees east. The coast of Togo in the Gulf of Guinea is 56 kilometers long and consists of lagoons with sandy beaches. In the north the land is characterized by a gently rolling savanna in contrast to the center of the country, which is characterized by hills. The south of Togo is characterized by a savanna and woodland plateau which reaches to a coastal plain with extensive lagoons and marshes. The highest mountain of the country is the Montagu at 986 m above sea level. The longest river is the Mono River with a length of 400 kilometers. It runs from north to south. The climate is generally tropical with average temperatures ranging from 23 degrees Celsius on the coast to about 30 degrees Celsius in the northernmost regions, with the dry climate and characteristics of a tropical savanna. To the south there are 2 seasons of rain, even though the average rainfall is not very high. Colonial era. Independence to present day. The coast of Togo is characterized by marshes and mangroves. High human population growth is leading to rapid deforestation, endangering many species. At least 4 parks and reserves have been established: Abdoulaye Faunal Reserve, Fazao Malfakassa National Park, Foss Auxiliary Lions National Park, and Karen National Park. The most frequently observed animals are giraffes, Cape buffalo, hyenas, and lions. Few elephants remain. Common birds are storks, cranes and marabou. Geography. Climate. Flora and fauna. Government. Administrative divisions. The President is elected by universal and direct suffrage for 5 years. He is also the commander of the armed forces and has the right to initiate legislation and dissolve parliament. Executive power is exercised by the President and the government. The head of government is the Prime Minister, who is appointed by the President. Togo's transition to democracy is stalled. Its democratic institutions remain nascent and fragile. President Nasingbe Ayadima, who ruled Togo under a one-party system, died of a heart attack on February 5, 2005. Gravely ill, he was being transported by plane to a foreign country for care. He died in transit while over Tunisia. Under the Togolese constitution, the President of the Parliament, Fambert Ouattara Nachaba, should have become President of the country, pending a new presidential election to be called within 60 days. Nachaba was out of the country, returning on an Air France plane from Paris. The Togolese army, known as Forces Armées Togolaises, or Togolese Armed Forces, closed the nation's borders, forcing the plane to land in nearby Benin. With an engineered power vacuum, the parliament voted to remove the constitutional clause that would have required an election within 60 days, and declared that Iadima's son, Fornassing would inherit the presidency and hold office for the rest of his father's term. Faure was sworn in on February 7, 2005, despite international criticism of the succession. Foreign relations. The African Union described the takeover as a military coup d'état. International pressure came also from the United Nations. Within Togo, opposition to the takeover culminated in riots in which several hundred died. There were uprisings in many cities and towns, mainly located in the southern part of the country. In the town of Anho, reports of a general civilian uprising followed by a large-scale massacre by government troops went largely unreported. In response, Fornassing agreed to hold elections, and on February 25, Nassing resigned as president, but soon afterward accepted the nomination to run for the office in April. On April 24, 2005, Nassing was elected president of Togo, receiving over 60% of the vote according to official results. His main rival in the race had been Emmanuel Bobakatani from the Union des Forces du Changement, or Union of Forces for Change. However, electoral fraud was suspected, due to a lack of European Union or other independent oversight. Parliament designated Deputy President, Bonfa Abbas, as interim president until the inauguration. On May 3, 2005, Fornassing was sworn in as the new president, and the European Union suspended aid to Togo in support of the opposition claims, unlike the African Union and the United States, which declared the vote reasonably fair. The Nigerian president and chair of the Olusegun Obasanjo, sought to negotiate between the incumbent government and the opposition to establish a coalition government, but rejected an commission appointment of former Zambian President, Kenneth Kaunda, as special envoy to Togo. In June, President Nassing named opposition leader Edem Kodjo as the Prime Minister. In October 2007, after several postponements, elections were held under proportional representation. This allowed the less populated North to seat as many MPs as the more populated South. The president-backed Party Rally of the Togolese people won outright majority, with the UFC coming second and the other parties claiming inconsequential representation. Again, vote-rigging accusations were leveled at the RPT, supported by the civil and military security apparatus. Despite the presence of an EU observer mission, cancelled ballots and illegal voting took place, the majority of which in RPT strongholds. The election was declared fair by the international community and praised as a model with little intimidation and few violent acts for the first time since a multi-party system was reinstated. On December 3, 2007, Kamlan Mali of the RPT was appointed to Prime Minister, succeeding Agboyabor. However, on September 5, 2008, after only 10 months in office, Mali resigned as Prime Minister of Togo. Fornassing won re-election in the March 2010 presidential election, taking 61% of the vote against Jean-Pierre Fabre from the UFC, who had been backed by an opposition coalition called FRAC. Though the March 2010 election was largely peaceful, electoral observers noted procedural errors and technical problems, and the opposition did not recognize the results, claiming irregularities had affected the outcome. Periodic protests followed the election. In May 2010, longtime opposition leader Gilchrist Olympio announced that he would enter into a power-sharing deal with the government, a coalition arrangement which provides the UFC with 8 ministerial posts. In June 2012, electoral reforms prompted protesters to take to the street in Lomé for several days. Protesters sought a return to the 1992 constitution that would re-establish presidential term limits. July 2012 saw the surprise resignation of the Prime Minister, Gilbert Houngbo. Days later, the Commerce Minister, Kwasi Ahumezunu, was named to lead the new government. In the same month, the home of opposition leader Jean-Pierre Fabre was raided by security forces, and thousands of protesters again rallied publicly against the government crackdown. Togo is divided into 5 regions, which are subdivided in turn into 30 prefectures. From north to south the regions are Savannes, Kara, Central, Plateaus, and Maritime. Although Togo's foreign policy is non-aligned, it has strong historical and cultural ties with Western Europe, especially France and Germany. Togo recognizes the People's Republic of China, North Korea, and Cuba. It re-established relations with Israel in 1987. Togo pursues an active foreign policy and participates in many international organizations. It is particularly active in West African regional affairs and in the African Union. Relations between Togo and neighboring states are generally good. Military. The military of Togo, in French FAT, consists of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Gendarmerie. Total military expenditures during the fiscal year of 2005 totaled 1.6% of the country's GDP. Military bases exist in Lomé, Timdja, Kara, Niamtougou, and Dapayong. The current Chief of the General Staff is Brigadier General Tidik Pina Acha Mohammed, who took office on May 19, 2009. The Air Force is equipped with Alpha jets. Togo is among the smallest countries in Africa, and enjoys one of the highest standards of living on the continent owing to its valuable phosphate deposits and a well-developed export sector based on agricultural products such as coffee, cocoa bean, and peanuts, which together generate roughly 30% of export earnings. The fertile land occupies 11.3% of the country, most of which is developed. Major crops are cassava, jasmine rice, corn, and millet. Other important sectors are brewery and the textile industry. A permanent problem is the lack of electricity, because the country is able to produce only about a third of its consumption. The rest is covered by imports from Ghana and Nigeria. Low market prices for Togo's major export commodities, however, coupled with the volatile political situation of the 1990s and early 2000s, had a negative effect on the economy. Economy. Togo is one of the least developed countries. The economic situation is still precarious. Togo serves as a regional commercial and trade center. The government's decade-long efforts, supported by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, to carry out economic reforms, to encourage investment, and to create the balance between income and consumption has stalled. Political unrest, including private and public sector strikes throughout 1992 and 1993, jeopardized the reform program, shrank the tax base, and disrupted vital economic activity. Togo imports machinery, equipment, petroleum products, and food. Main import partners are France, the Netherlands, Côte d'Ivoire, Germany, Italy, South Africa, and China. The main exports are cocoa, coffee, re-export of goods, phosphates, and cotton. Major export partners are Burkina Faso, China, the Netherlands, Benin, and Mali. Agriculture, mining, demographics. In terms of structural reforms, Togo has made progress in the liberalization of the economy, namely in the fields of trade and port activities. However, the privatization program of the cotton sector, telecommunications, and water supply has stalled. The country currently has no debt due to financial assistance from the outside, while Togo is likely among the most beneficiary countries under the initiative Help in Heavily Indebted Poor Countries. January 12, 1994 devaluation of the currency by 50% provided an important impetus to renewed structural adjustment. These efforts were facilitated by the end of strife in 1994 and a return to overt political calm. Progress depends on increased openness in government financial operations and possible downsizing of the armed forces, on which the regime has depended to stay in place. Lack of aid, along with depressed cocoa prices, generated a 1% fall in GDP in 1998, with growth resuming in 1999. Togo is a member of the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law in Africa. Agriculture is the backbone of the economy, although it is struggling with a chronic shortage of funds for the purchase of irrigation equipment and fertilizers, which significantly reduces its performance. Agriculture generated 28.2% of GDP in 2012 and employed 49% of the working population in 2010. The country is essentially self-sufficient in food production. Livestock production is dominated by cattle breeding. Mining generated about 33.9% of GDP in 2012 and employed 12% of the population in 2010. Togo has the fourth largest phosphate deposits in the world. Their production is 2.1 million tons per year. Since the mid-90s, however, there has been a decline in the mining industry and government will need to invest heavily to sustain it. The mining industry is facing difficulties due to falling phosphate prices on world markets and increasing foreign competition. There are also reserves of limestone, marble, and salt. The industry provides only 20.4% of national income, because it consists only of a few of light industry and builders. Large reserves of limestone allows Togo to produce cement. The November 2010 census gave Togo a population of 6,191,155, more than double the total counted in the last census. That census, taken in 1981, showed the nation had a population of 2,719,567. The capital and largest city, Lomé, grew from 375,499 in 1981 to 837,437 in 2010. When the urban population of surrounding Golfi Prefecture is added, the Lomé agglomeration contained 1,477,660 residents in 2010. Other cities in Togo according to the new census were Sokad, Kara, K Palamé, Atokpame, Dapayong and Tsevi. With an estimated population of 7,606,374, Togo is the 107th largest country by population. Most of the population live in rural villages dedicated to agriculture or pastures. The population of Togo shows a strong growth. From 1961 to 2003 it quintupled. In Togo, there are about 40 different ethnic groups, the most numerous of which are the Yu in the south, who make up 32% of the population. Along the southern coastline they account for 21% of the population. Also found are Kotokoli or Tem and Chamba in the center and the Kabi people in the north. The Wachis are 14% of the population. Sometimes the Yus and Wachis are considered the same, but the French who studied both groups considered them different people. Other ethnic groups include the Mina, Masi, and Aya people. There is also a European population who make up less than 1%. Religion in Togo. According to the CIA Factbook, approximately 29% of the population is Christian, 20% are Muslim, and 51% hold indigenous beliefs. About 50% of the population adhere to traditional African beliefs including animalism, fetishism, the cult of ancestors, the forces of nature, etc. Christianity in Roman Catholic form began to spread from the middle of the 15th century, after the arrival of the Portuguese colonizers. Germans brought Protestantism in the late 19th century. Togo is a multilingual country. According to one count, 39 languages are spoken. Of the 39 languages, the official language is French. 2 spoken indigenous languages were designated politically as national languages in 1975, Yu and Kabi. French is used in formal education, administration, and commerce. Yu is a language of wider communication in the south. Tem functions to a limited extent as a trade language in some northern towns. Officially, Yu and Kabi are national languages, which in the Togolese context means languages that are promoted in formal education and used in the media. Despite the colonial past of the country, the German language was not widely propagated until the French takeover of the colony during World War I, and today it has no official status. Health expenditure was 5.2% of GDP in 2014, which ranks the country in 45th place in the world. The infant mortality rate is approximately 43.7 deaths per 1,000 children in 2016. Male life expectancy at birth was at 62.3 in 2016, whereas it was at 67.7 years for females. There were 5 physicians per 100,000 people in 2008 according to a 2013 UNICEF report. 4% of women in Togo have undergone female genital mutilation, which is a significantly lower percentage than other countries in the region. As of 2015, the maternal mortality rate per 100,000 births for Togo is 368, compared with 350 in 2010 and 539.7 in 1990. The under 5 mortality rate, per 1,000 births is 100 and the neonatal mortality as a percentage of under 5's mortality is 32. In Togo the number of midwives per 1,000 live births is 2 and the lifetime risk of death for pregnant women is 1 in 67. In 2016, 5,100 people had HIV/AIDS. Education in Togo is compulsory for 6 years. In 1996, the gross primary enrollment rate was 119.6%, and the net primary enrollment rate was 81.3%. In 2011, the net enrollment rate was 94%, one of the best in the West African sub-region. The education system has suffered from teacher shortages, lower educational quality in rural areas, and high repetition and dropout rates. Togo's culture reflects the influences of its many ethnic groups, the largest and most influential of which are the Yu, Mina, Tem, Chamba, and Kaber. Despite the influences of Christianity and Islam, over half of the people of Togo follow native animistic practices and beliefs. Yu statuary is characterized by its famous statuettes which illustrate the worship of the Ibji. Sculptures and hunting trophies were used rather than the more ubiquitous African masks. The wood carvers of Clodo are famous for their chains of marriage. Two characters are connected by rings drawn from only one piece of wood. The dyed fabric batiks of the artisanal center of Clodo represent stylized and colored scenes of ancient everyday life. The loin cloths used in the ceremonies of the weavers of Asahoun are famous. Works of the painter Soki Ador are inspired by the immense arid extents, swept by the dry wind, and where the soil keeps the prints of the men and the animals. The plastics technician Paula Hai is internationally recognized today. He practiced the zada, a kind of pyro engraving, and his monumental achievements decorate Lomé. The official Togolese drink is called sodabi, a liquor that is created from the distillation of palm wine. On August 12, 2008, Benjamin Bukpati won a bronze medal in the men's K1 kayak slalom, the first medal ever won by a member of the Togolese team at the Olympics. Football is the most recognized and national sport of Togo. Following suit with Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Ghana, and Senegal, Togo qualified for the World Cup in 2006. Togo did not record a win in the group stage. Togo also qualified for CAF. Emmanuel Adebayor is the most famous footballer for Togo, scoring 30 goals for the national team and 97 in the English Premier League. Largest cities. Ethnic groups. Religion. Languages. Health. Education. Culture. Sports. Olympics. Football. Basketball. Media.